This is the original Canon Digital Rebel, the camera that started a DSLR revolution. First DSLR under $1,000 with a kit lens. So it's thanks to this camera that DSLRs really took off in the early to mid 2000s. Let's put $30 into perspective, guys. $30 is 1% of the cost of some of these new mirrorless cameras coming out. Good UV filters cost more than $30. And for $30, you're getting a proper DSLR. APS-C size sensor, using all the technology that Canon was able to afford to put in a $1,000 DSLR body. 17 years, guys. This camera is almost old enough to drink everywhere in the world. Now 6 megapixels is plenty for the internet, for Instagram, for product photography, for your online store, but certainly you're not going to print large. 645 grams or 23 ounces, continuous shooting of 2.5 FPS. I guess we should be thankful it has continuous shooting at all. 7 autofocus points. The screen is fixed. It's a very low resolution screen. There's no microphone jack, there's no video, and it's 30 bucks used. It may be $30 on today's market, but it's a proper DSLR with full manual controls. You have manual, aperture priority, shutter priority, program mode, and all the various scene modes that are usually included. But this is a great camera to learn photography on. It just gives you everything you need and nothing more, with emphasis on nothing more. It's a very simple cut down design. It's got an option to shoot with a remote. You can set exposure lock. You can adjust focus points. It's got 7 focus points. You can change your exposure compensation. Everything is very, very simple. Again, nothing will confuse you here. You look through the very small viewfinder, half press to focus, full press to shoot. That's it. It's a simple DSLR. Another good thing about this camera, if you've been disappointed with the complexity of digital camera menus lately, well, don't worry. This camera is not going to confuse you. This is the entire menu. You can choose your quality. You can shoot in RAW, which is good. You can do exposure bracketing, which is pretty nice and honestly quite useful on this camera because the dynamic range isn't very good, and we'll touch on that in a bit. You can set a custom white balance. If you're plugging this camera into a computer and it's not reading it, try changing the communication protocol from normal to PTP. This took me a while to figure out, especially if you're on a Mac. If you use this camera for any extended period of time, you will greatly appreciate the equipment you already have. Okay, just look through this tiny viewfinder and preview images on this screen for a few hours. It will make you feel like you already have the equipment you need. Okay, this will cure your gas. For the low price of $30, I will cure your gear acquisition syndrome. If it gets stolen or damaged or dropped is not a problem, because just the cost to ship it to a repair center is already greater than buying another camera. Again, it's very cheap, very plasticky. I wouldn't take it to the Arctic. It's a very basic design, not weatherproof. Stuff rattles, maybe due to the fact that it's 17 years old. The rubber's peeling off this grip, although that's pretty common with DSLRs in general as they get to a certain age. It's got a USB 1.0 connection, maximum 1.5 megabytes per second. On top of that, it uses these older CF cards, which are a bit harder to find these days. But if you're buying a kit, 300D or another Rebel from someone, they'll often bundle them. The LCD screen is absolutely tiny. It's 1.8 inches. It takes a while to start up. Here, let me show you guys. You start it up, 2 seconds for startup. Not as snappy as today's digital cameras. Autofocus, shoot, takes a while to write the images to the card. Now you do get a histogram, which is helpful because you're not going to get much information on the screen itself. The big downside of this camera, guys, is high ISO performance. So when the light drops in the evening and you're finding that you have to increase the ISO 100, 200, 400, 800, 1600, and that's it. Now with the special third-party firmware, you can push that to 3200 and you can unlock a bunch of other stuff like flash exposure compensation. But honestly, you do not want to be shooting this camera at ISO 3200. In fact, by ISO 800, it already gets quite grainy. You cannot actually adjust the metering. It's constantly in evaluative metering unless you're in manual and then it switches to center weighted metering. There's also no way of actually changing the autofocus mode. I mean, changing it from single to continuous autofocus. Now, the way you unlock continuous autofocus is actually by putting the camera into sport mode. Okay, but there's no way to actually set it manually. To demonstrate how slowly this thing actually takes pictures and records them, we're going to do a continuous shooting mode to take pictures of this basil plant here. Focus. That's it, guys. 4 shots. We got 4 shots of the basil. It's still recording. While it's recording, let's talk a bit about having a basil plant at home. One of the best things you can do is start an herb garden. Just water it once a day. You'll have fresh basil for your pasta. Get some thyme and rosemary while you're at it. This is a better deal, possibly better value than this $30 APS-C DSLR. Okay? Herb garden, look into it. You can expect a very basic, very fun shooting experience, but don't expect it to behave like a more advanced prosumer or professional camera. Don't think of this as a digital camera. Think of this as a film camera that just gives you the results back a lot faster than the lab. Okay, and then you won't be disappointed. In fact, you'll be pleasantly surprised. The camera does shoot RAW, and I highly recommend you guys to shoot in RAW. You can recover about a stop of exposure by shooting RAW. So that's helpful. Every stop counts with this camera. I tend to stay within ISO 100 or 200, and I'm good to go. I can get sharp shots handheld, 1/15 of a second, no problem. Now, in terms of what lenses to get with APS-C cameras, pretty much any digital rebel these days, I would highly recommend getting STM lenses. Now, STM step motor lenses are mostly useful for video shooters because the focus is very quiet and it's very fast. On top of that, you are getting modern lens design. So a lot of the STM lenses are actually a lot better than their previous counterparts. And this kit lens is no exception. 18 to 55 millimeters, available used for about $100. I think it's the best kind of pairing with this camera. This camera is actually capable of quite a lot. You can shoot general photography scenes with it. You can shoot basic street scenes with it. You can do landscapes. You can stitch together panoramas. You can do basic HDR. You can absolutely do product photography. Now, the colors out of this camera were a lot of fun. I don't like spending time in Lightroom correcting colors, and I found that for daytime shots, this thing just produced natural, pleasing colors straight out of camera. Now, for nighttime photos, it was a different story. As soon as the ISO goes above 400 into the 800 or 1600 territory, you're going to see banding in the shadows. You're going to see artifacts. At night, if your ISOs do get a bit high, all you have to do is convert the photo to black and white. You can convert grainy photos to black and white, and suddenly you've gone from ugly, nasty color noise to cool, artistic, filmic grain. Now, 6 megapixels isn't much, but you can absolutely stitch together photos and make giant panoramas for printing. Often makes sense to shoot with auto exposure bracketing, and you'll have a nice HDR picture. I've always wanted to take a picture of a Canon with a Canon, and now I've finally done it. This is a Canon from 1807, made in Scotland. Here we're doing some panning at night. Took me a while. In case it doesn't look good straight out of camera, you can always apply a cheesy synthwave effect to it. Okay guys, so if you have experience shooting with this camera, let us know in the comment section. Share your photos. I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Let's jump ahead to 2011. That's 8 years of Canon DSLR progress. If you want to get into DSLRs for cheap, you go for one of these T3Is. It was the first one to have an articulated screen and 1080p 30 FPS video, which is great. You can absolutely shoot a student budget film. Okay, so that's from 2011, and it's available used for $200, and there's a microphone jack. Boom. So what if we jump ahead another 8 years? So 16 years of total progress. Let's see how far we've come. 24 megapixels. Okay, 450 grams. So we've cut the weight down even more. Continuous shooting is up to 5 now. Autofocus points are the same. Key difference being there's now dual pixel autofocus. The screen this time is a touch screen. Same resolution, but it can now shoot at 4K 25 FPS. Microphone jack, and available used for 420 or new for 750 as of the filming of this video.